It's that time again. This time it's episode 47. With you as always, me, Chucky from the forums, and we've got Jiggy.
Indeed, it is.
So, another week of awesome movies, I guess. And for today's show, we start off with a sequel to a movie that we both enjoyed. This time it's Wrong Turn 2, Dead End from 2007. And then we'll be moving on to one of David Cronenberg's earlier movies, Shivers from 1975. After that, we've got a more modern horror film called The Shortcut from 2009. And then we shift over to an action movie from the 80s, American Ninja from 1985. And then we finish off the show with When a Stranger Calls from 1979, which is a bit of a thriller stalker type movie.
So, as Chucky said, we are starting off with Wrong Turn 2, Dead End, which came out 2007. And if you're familiar with the first movie, it's not too different. It's a group of reality show contestants who ran afoul of a family of somewhat deformed hillbilly folk in the forests of West Virginia. And some things happen, and some violence happens, and other things happen. And they have to survive and such. It's good stuff. And actually, it's a pretty decent sequel. Many horror fans, at least the ones I know, find it a pretty, okay follow up. And a lot of that might be because of Henry Rollins, who when he's in the movie and his pretty good performance. The violence is pretty decent. I'm not sure if there's anything here quite as memorable as the first movie, but overall, I think it's a pretty okay sequel, even though it may not be amazing.
Yeah, I've only ever seen this one once before, and that was right as soon as it got released on DVD back in, I guess that was 2007. Or maybe that was 2008, somewhere around that time. And I remember thinking it was kind of meh, obviously because I haven't bothered to watch it again since then, at least up until now. And, I didn't have. Let's just put it this way. I mean, it's definitely not a bad movie. I don't know if I'd quite get to the point where I'd call it decent. And there's a number of different reasons why, but I'm not sure where to start with, but I guess I'll just start by mentioning. I mean, the first movie was consistently well paced. It was fast, and it kind of moved at the exact same pace from start to finish. And now this one still kind of does, at least for the most part. I do feel maybe towards the beginning, like after the opening scene, like there's a little more characters here than I think there was in the previous movie to showcase, and they're trying to give some character development to, I guess. And I don't know, this one just feels like a little more like a more cheaper direct-to-video movie, which I think it was. I don't believe this ever got like a theater release like the first one did. And I don't know, that shines through a bit. I think the acting in the movie is a step down from the first one, clearly. From the good guys to the bad guys. Everyone just looks and acts like a shittier version of whatever we got in the first movie. Add on to the fact that they've got this reality TV type plot to the movie, and I don't know if there's really many good reality type horror movies out there, at least not that I can think of, or maybe at least not for sequels. I don't know about original movies, but I mean, it's not shoved down our throats throughout the movie. I mean, it's just used as an excuse for why they're out there, but still, it's something that doesn't really do anything for me. But I will say Well, one thing from the original movie, and if people go back and listen to our review of that, they'll hear what we were talking about, but I felt that the opening to the original movie was kind of weak. And in this one, it's a bit better because you get a really good, maybe even the best kill in the movie, to be honest, in the opening scene. And usually whenever that happens, it kind of means the rest is all downhill. And for the most part, I felt like the majority of the movie was downhill. At least up until maybe the last, I don't know, 20 minutes. Then it gets... I think from that point on, it's pretty decent. You get a lot of gore. You know, there's a lot of action going on. But yeah, aside from pretty good opening and a pretty decent ending, I think the big chunk in the middle is what really hurts the movie for me for a lot of those reasons.
Yeah, I think my personal biggest issue with the movie probably has to do with the antagonists. In the first movie we had obviously three deformed guys. This one is sort of like a family. There's a couple of females, couple of like 3 or 4 men. It's sort of how to keep in track who is who since all of them are deformed. And I mean, if you have a good eye, you might be able to do it. But I'll be honest, I don't know how many there were at the beginning, like 6 or 7, something like that. Which is, I mean, fine, because it's not like the first movie ever said, hey, these are the only 3 deformed people, you know, in this area. But it just felt a bit much, especially after somewhere in this movie it says it's only been like 30 years since some paper mill was spilling chemicals into the river that was causing this. And 30 years with a family, with as many members as this family has, it just seems a bit quick. So I don't know, I didn't care much for that aspect of this.
Yeah, I just felt like the hillbilly type characters in this movie, they just still seemed a little more tacky, and I don't know. I could see that the main one is played by Ken Kersinger, who most people would recognize as the guy that played Jason in Freddy vs. Jason, and I just couldn't stop thinking about how he probably looks the same under that Jason mask when he was making that movie. So I just couldn't stop thinking of that and how stupid his face looked. Like, I wanted to punch him in the face.
Yes. I have nothing against that guy, so.
Well, I don't either. It's just, I don't know, something about that that lip thing that he's got in this movie is just drives me nuts. Yeah.
One thing I actually did sort of like about this movie that sort of surprised me, because like you, I had seen this once before, but it's been quite some time since I've seen it. I thought a lot of the characters were actually decent. Maybe the performances weren't always great, but you have like that one black guy in the movie who's a pretty good guy, so much so that the producer guy just didn't care for his style and just refused to engage in some, shall we say, carnal activities for the audience. But black guy was a pretty good guy. You have the guy's girlfriend, Mara Stone, played by Aliska Palladino, who had a somewhat surprising. She left the movie earlier than I expected. I was expecting this one to be one of the surviving people toward the end, and it's not quite how it happens. And even like, I think her name's Nina. She was sort of a goth-ish type chick. I thought she was, after a little while, it took her a little to defreeze. I thought she was a decent character too, so I was surprised by the characters, and especially like I mentioned earlier, though I'm not a person a big fan of the music of Henry Rollins. I do like his performance here, especially because I think it's just fun to see him fight back against these deformed people, and I know I have a fun time watching that. I just wish he had a slightly happier ending than what he might have had.
Yeah, me too. He probably was the most memorable thing in this movie, I guess. Or most memorable character, I'll say. Which brings me to a point that I think the writing of this movie is just a little too... there's a lot of stereotypical type characters in this movie. You know, you got the jock, you got the military tough guy. They've got one who's basically a slut. To be honest, I've seen that one woman in a couple of movies, and every single one she's been a slut. So, I guess there's certain roles you're born to play.
Or maybe she's not just acting.
Yeah. You know, you got the goth chick, or, you know, the one who's suicidal, and you got the one guy who's just cracking sex jokes. And,
Okay, yeah, I was so over that guy as soon as he started talking.
Yeah, you know, you got the lesbian. I mean, it feels like the first movie, they didn't try and force so many different types of character traits down your throat. They were just random people.
Well, I think just to play devil's advocate, since they were doing a reality TV show, they obviously went out of the way to choose the specific stereotypes to begin with. So I think in a way it sort of makes sense in the context of the story.
I guess, but still, it doesn't change the fact that you still get those stereotypes. So, even though there might be a little more of a reason for it, it still feels like a lot of those other type of movies with those types of characters. Though I will say that, I mean, there was one nice touch where they had the one guy wearing a Battle Royale shirt, which seemed to be a good compliment to the type of show they were making, I guess.
Yeah, and I'll say this, I actually do watch some reality TV shows, like they referenced they referenced Survivor in the movie, and I actually do enjoy Survivor for a few reasons. And this game show, at least based on my understanding, that seems like a complicated game show. I know they were just going for like trying to get a pilot going, just 6 episodes, but boy, this game show has a lot going on, and I'm not sure if that would catch on with the audiences.
Yeah, I mean, at first I was kind of happy to see that they had that. I guess if you want to call him the gas attendant from the first movie, like the hillbilly guy. Like, as soon as I saw him, I was like, oh, you know, that's kind of nice seeing someone from the first movie. But I also, like, because I hadn't seen this movie in, almost, I don't know, 12, 13 years or whatever it's been, I've completely forgotten everything that happens in this movie, so I don't recall him being in the movie, so, but when I saw him, I was like, oh, jeez, there's no way this guy's not an inbreeder. So, you know, it didn't surprise me, the little twist there that happens.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this movie, there's not nearly as much memorable things going on in this movie. Like, the first movie was pretty simple, just trying to survive against these, you know, 3 freaks who are chasing after them, and this movie certainly has some, I guess, okay kills. I sort of liked some of the archery stuff. I think I also like the archery stuff from the first movie. And like I said, seeing Henry Rollins fighting back, that's probably the most fun I had in this movie. So I mean, I'd already say it's not a great movie, but I think for especially if you've seen some of the later sequels down the line, I think it's an okay movie. And like I said, I think a lot of people out there, at least in comparison to what happens later on, find this one at least okay, which I think is a pretty okay assessment of it. It may not be great, but you can probably have a decent time with it, even if it's not exactly the most memorable material.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm ready to rate it, but just before I do, I also wanted to say that that in that opening where she's driving in the car and she like runs into the hillbilly hick, whatever you want to call them.
I call him an American.
Okay. But immediately, as soon as like he got hit by the windshield, I was thinking, oh geez, looked like one of those guys trying to do one of those dodgy insurance claims, those guys who just run into a car on purpose. It just felt like that.
Indeed. Yeah, so I know, I think I pretty much said it all. it's an okay sequel to a much better movie. It's serviceable. If you enjoyed the first one, you might have an okay time with this one. I would expect it to blow your mind or anything. Even like some of the I guess more gory scenes in this movie, it it just isn't anywhere near as memorable as what we had in the first one. So I think it's an okay movie. It really sort of straddles the line. I considered giving this one a 6, but like I said, I had fun seeing Henry Rollins fighting these people. Like we never got any type of that, like, I guess, really great fighting back in the first movie. I mean, this guy has some military stuff going on too, so I had a fun time with that. So I'm just going to give this one an average rating of a 7 out of 10. It's not great, it's not terrible, it just sort of is, which is more than you can say for some of the sequels past this point. So 7 out of 10 seems like a fair rating.
I was actually ready to give this a 5 out of 10 up until the point where, like the last 20 minutes, where we started to get some, fairly good action and gore. I mean, the movie throughout kind of has, gory kills, but I mean, outside of that, everything else was kind of was not annoying me, but it just felt like really kind of like cheap and generic, and yeah. So I will give the movie a 6 out of 10, which, is my usual rating for an okay movie. And I think that's the best way to describe this one. It's okay. I do feel that this one, aside from being a little more cheaper and generic than the first movie and having, slightly worse acting than the first one, I also feel this one lacks the tension that we found in some of the scenes from the first movie as well, which was a big part of what made the first movie good. And that's not really here. Let's move on to Shivers from 1975, which, in a nutshell, is about the residents of an apartment building who are being infected by a strain of parasites that turn them into mindless, sex-crazed people, I guess, who then in zombie-like fashion seek to infect all the other people that they run into. Obviously a movie I've heard about for quite some time, actually never bothered to watch it up until now. I've never been... I've always wanted to enjoy David Cronenberg's stuff. So bad, I would really like to enjoy his stuff, but I don't know, I just can't. That's not to say that everything I watch of his I don't enjoy, but I certainly haven't ever had a great time with any of his movies so far. And I've watched pretty much at least all of his, popular stuff, the type of movies that get brought up all the time. And I think out of all of those, the best one was probably The Fly, and that was, definitely no higher than a 7 out of 10 movie for me. I don't know if it's the body horror aspect of his movies. I've never been a huge body horror type guy, and I don't believe you are either, but you might enjoy some of his movies a little, maybe more than I do, at least on average. And, Shivers, not really an exception to this. I felt like the movie, even though there's a few things that happen in the first half of the movie, I was quite bored. At least up until somewhere around the halfway mark where, people start going around infecting others, on a more consistent basis, I guess. To the point where it's not slowing down and then every second scene is someone getting attacked. And, at that point, okay, I was getting a little more entertained, I guess you could say. So yeah, I didn't have a great overall time with it. It has its up and downs, for me. Mostly downs to begin with and some ups later on.
Yeah, it's actually somewhat amusing because I have a bit of a reversed opinion. I actually think the first 30-40 minutes were some of the strongest parts of the movie, and once it turns into more of a, I guess you could say, sort of a more generic zombie type thing, my interest goes down a bit. Once everybody's infected and starts running around, I mean, it's still interesting, but I just don't care as much. I sort of like the almost snowballing effect. You just see a few sick people, and then slowly things get more and more out of hand. And by the time that one guy gets there, I think his name's Rallo. By the time he gets there, and he's been trying to get there throughout like most of the movie. Once he gets there, like things are totally screwed up. It's way too late anyway. And I think the ending's decent, but I think the movie's strongest when it's almost feels like a sort of procedural type thing. Just we sort of go through the lives of some of these people, get a few different points of view. Wife with a sick husband, just a doctor. Then we see this really random murder happen in the beginning with no context. So I think some of the more, not necessarily mystery, but some of the build up is a little, at least for me, it's a little more enjoyable than the what follows after.
Yeah, it does have a bit of a zombie type movie vibe to it, even though it's obviously still more of a parasite creature type movie. But yeah, you get those scenes where they're all just as a group, slowly moving towards you, and especially towards the end there. I was pretty disappointed that the nurse got attacked when she did, because she was probably the only character I kind of cared about in the movie.
Is it that just because she got naked?
Yes. Well, she was kind of cute, I guess. But yeah, the finest woman in the movie, I guess. So I gotta try and save some of the booty.
Yes.
And that main doctor guy, his blonde hair was driving me nuts.
Yeah, it's funny. He sort of reminded me of a cheap ripoff of some other actor with blonde hair whose name I forget right now. Which loses it to fact since I forget the name. I think it's David Soul. So, I guess a few other things I appreciated about this. One, the beginning of the movie starts off with sort of an advertisement to live in this apartment complex. It's a little boring, but it's totally 70s. But I think it's a somewhat interesting look at trying to pull people into just purchasing an apartment here. And I thought it was actually a pretty okay advertisement once you could get past how boring it is. I sort of like the idea of, hey, this apartment complex has everything you need. It has a doctor, it has like medical facilities, it has convenience stores, it has everything. So I sort of like that. And also what I enjoyed was, I think it's like just 14 minutes away from the city. And it's on like the apartment complex itself is on this somewhat small island. So obviously they have a bridge connecting it, but it sort of gives it almost a somewhat secluded feel, which I think works once you get toward the end of the movie too. So I enjoyed the setting, and I sort of enjoyed how they, I guess, set up the location, even though it's not like necessarily original, but I did enjoy the whole, hey, it's all taking place in this one pretty big apartment complex. And I don't know, I just had I had a more decent time with this than I usually do with Cronenberg movies, because as you said, I'm not like a huge Cronenberg fan myself.
Well, despite my lack of enjoyment overall for this movie, I'm sure I'll still give it another chance at some point. But yeah, this time it just didn't do it for me.
Out of interest, did you enjoy this more or less than The Brood, or are they pretty much like on the same?
I would say slightly less, and that's mainly because despite The Brood having some of the same similar problems, and like I said, it's he tends to always do this body horror type stuff. I think there was just a little more going on in The Brood. Like you've got the kids, and you've got the mother at the end, and I feel like there was a bit of a build up to what was going on there, whereas I mean obviously there was a build up here, but I guess the story of it didn't grab me, I guess. But look, I enjoyed them fairly similar, on a similar level, but I would certainly probably pick The Brood over this one.
It's the wrong choice, but I do understand.
Though, I do remember that one woman in The Brood who had like one of the worst haircuts I've ever seen in film ever.
I do remember you spent quite some time talking about that, and I was just sitting here like, okay.
So, anyone out there listening, if you want to hear more about that, go find our review for The Brood. You will be informed. But yeah, like I said, I really want to enjoy Cronenberg's stuff, but I've just never been able to get into most of his movies. And I see his son is making movies as well. There's a new one called Possessor, which, you know, looks interesting. I'll give it a shot, but it makes me wonder if, you know, he's going to do just kind of more of the same. But in any case, Shivers, it took a while to get going, about halfway through. Then I started to enjoy some of the stuff that was happening, but as an overall movie, I'm going to give this one a 5 out of 10. I didn't have a great time with it. Wasn't terrible. And like I said, I will give it another chance, and there's always a chance of me enjoying it more. And, you know, if it can work its way up to a 6 out of 10, hey, at least that'd be something.
Indeed. So this is a movie that I enjoyed the first time I saw it, and I enjoyed it this time around too. I do think it's a great movie, and it's also worth mentioning. I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but at least in some places, this movie is also known as They Came From Within, which is the title I saw the movie under when I first saw it many years back, so it's the same movie, guys. I enjoyed this a bit more than I usually enjoy Cronenberg. Like, if you ask me which Cronenberg movie I'd prefer, like Brood, Videodrome, Shivers, Rabid, Shivers would probably be my go-to movie, if only because I like the setting, and while there is body horror elements, I feel like it's more in line with something I'm okay with. Like, the idea in this movie is like this guy's trying to create a parasite that can sort of take over the function of like an organ. So like if just create a parasite that can sort of take over a liver's function, and then the parasite gets out of control because, well, this guy's insane guy who does stuff. But that seems a little more in line with, I don't know, what I consider reality, you know, compared to what The Brood had or what Videodrome had. To be honest, I don't even know what Videodrome had. Videodrome is such a strange movie. But this one seems a little more real to me, and it helps that it has a very 70s feel to it, which I know some people might consider dry, but I always sort of enjoyed the atmosphere of this. So I think overall, it's one of, at least based on what I've seen so far, one of my favorite Cronenberg movies, even though, like I said, I don't love it. So I'm going to give this one a 7.5, and I think I'm going to round that down to a 7 out of 10, but I do think it's a smidge above average. It's just not fantastic.
Yeah. I'm just not sure about that.
I deeply apologize. So speaking about parasites, next up we have The Shortcut from 2009. This is possibly one of the most, I guess you could say, unknown movies tonight. Not that it's particularly obscure. In a town, there's a shortcut that many people try to avoid because this crazy guy lives in a house, you know, on a shortcut, and he, you know, according to legends, he attacks people, he kills dogs. So this one guy who lost a dog gets some people together to go looking for his dog, and they encounter the horrors of The Shortcut. This isn't a particularly great and or good movie. It's a very tepid movie. I think on IMDb has either like a 5 or a 5.1. It's a very like middle of the road type thing, and if you see the movie, you can sort of see why. I mean, parts of the movie are okay. There's some okay characters, but a lot of this is, I don't know, very generic, very lackluster. With, honestly, it feels like there's not a whole lot going on, and the ending is god awful. So what do you think? Have you, out of interest, actually, have you seen this one before? Is this like a new watch for you?
Yeah, I never even heard of this one up until we put it on the list for today's show. So, first time watch for me. Now, I watched this on Amazon Prime, and it's got like a full screen presentation, which, to be honest, I was very surprised to see because I was like, didn't like full screen die out when VHS stopped production, like, which would have been what, 2004, 2005, something like that. And this movie is 2009, so I'm thinking, what the hell is a movie doing in full screen from 2009? In any case, overall, like you said, it's not a great movie. It just feels like your generic direct-to-video mid-2000 horror teen movie, to be honest. I mean, the teen element's not as... what's the word I'm looking for? It's not as strong, I guess. That's the simplest way I can put it. The teen element of it, like, it's not like a teeny bopper type movie, but it does center around teenagers, high school students, whatever you want to call them. I think there's a decent story to this one. Like, there's a decent idea, but I think the execution of it's just stupid. And with that being said, I don't think the story is like the most original thing ever, but at least it's, you know, it's got some interesting points to it. But I think the worst thing it does with the story is that it's one of those movies that just throws in a flashback at the end to basically explain everything, and which just points to that it had a decent idea, but the writing of it is just not good.
Yeah, they have like, I think 2 or 3 flashbacks pop up throughout the movie, and none of them, aside from maybe the first one, none of them were like really that interesting. None of them were amazing. And the ones where the arm was just, oh hey, that's a big shark. It's one of those things that I can't imagine most modern day audiences watching this movie and thinking, oh my god, and then, well, hey, there's another one. So, it just, I just, I don't know why they thought that would work. I'm not sure if they thought it would work. So it just comes across as somewhat weak. I think that's the biggest problem with this movie. It seems so weak, so tepid, so, I'm assuming this movie is PG-13.
Yeah.
This not like a whole lot here. And I actually liked some of the characters. I liked some of the ideas in the movie, like the one Jack character. I sort of like his introduction. He's just, the main character just walking down the hallway, and this Jack's like, "Hey, you I forget the main character's name, but you this guy." It's like, "Yeah, what's up?" It's like, "Hey, I lost my dog. Let's go find him, bro." I sort of like that. It seems you know, he's actually a Jack character who I thought was a pretty okay guy. You could argue he's probably slightly better character than no, I sort of liked the wise ass girl. I forget what her name was. But she was a dark-haired girl in the movie. I sort of liked her character. I thought she was so funny. But the Jack character is actually a pretty okay guy. Aside from the whole, let's break into this guy's house to see if he has my dog. But I can understand where he's coming from. So it has interesting ideas, and it actually has some okay characters. But it just, the final product just feels really tepid and just not really worth the effort.
Yeah. Speaking of the characters in the movie, I mean, there's a couple of actors in the movie that, you know, I didn't mind seeing in this one. Dave Franco, he's got a bit of a smaller role in it. I never usually mind watching him in movies. Like, I get the feeling that he seems like one of those guys you wouldn't mind hanging out and chatting to, but he's got some weird eyebrow action going on. He's got some thick ass eyebrows, son. And I guess the other person is I can't recall her name, but she was in Tucker and Dale, which I noticed her from, and she was also in Sex Drive, which is like an American Pie type movie.
Indeed, and that would be, I think, Katrina Borden, who has, like, I guess, an attractive look, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, a bit of a bit of a typical blonde look, but I was saying early in the movie, because I was watching this with my wife, who actually enjoyed this a bit more than I did, and I was saying that, geez, she kind of reminds me of like a more popular actress. It took me a couple of minutes, and then I was like, oh yeah, I'm thinking of Christine Taylor. As soon as I said that, my wife was like, oh, she does not look anything like Christine Taylor. And then another half hour goes by, and my wife's like, oh, she kind of looks like Christine Taylor. I was like, yeah, see? And that kind of like main guy in the movie, like the main teen guy, he's kind of got like low budget Paul Walker vibes from him. I mean, his transformation would be complete in another 10 years if he ends up dating a 16-year-old, but there you go. I will say there was one moment in the movie where there's a little bit of tension, and that's when the old guy turns up to the Scooby-Doo place. What a terrible business name. Scooby-Doo. I mean, you've got P and Do in the name of your business.
Yeah, I'm not sure if you're the hot dog or ice cream from that place, so.
Yeah. He wants a dog. Keep it Scoopy. I'd probably quit my job if I was forced to say that shit. Yeah, so that was probably like the only little bit of tension that I picked up on in the movie. Everything else is just kind of, yeah.
Yeah, that's honestly probably a pretty good description for the movie as a whole. Like, it's an, I guess, an okay watch if you're watching it just once. I can't imagine it's going to make many people's, like, all-time favorites. It is, I guess, worth noting, maybe for some people. This movie does have, for like maybe 5-6 minutes, William B. Davis in it, who, if you are an X-Files fan, played the cigarette smoking man. So seeing him pop up when he does, it's sort of interesting seeing that, hey, this guy was still alive at this point in time, so that's nice. But I don't really think his role is a particularly good one. Although I do think it leads to maybe, I wouldn't say one of the best scenes, but one of the few scenes that actually stuck with me like a day after seeing the movie, where the guy gets his hand crushed with the sledgehammer. I mean, it looked somewhat fake, but hey, it still looked painful. I wouldn't want my hand crushed like that, so.
Yeah. Well, let's put it this way. The main kick I got out of this movie was just one small moment in the movie where the kid's playing a video game as one of the Army of Two games, which just remind me of PlayStation 3. I have some good PlayStation 3 memories, and playing that game, I mean, it's not a great game, but it's, it gave me those memories of playing shit like that, and to be honest, it really has nothing to do with the movie. So,
although
the best part of the movie was something that doesn't really have anything to do with the movie.
The character who was playing that game leads to like just a horrible ending, which obviously I won't talk about. But if I feel like the ending, there's a few things leading up to it. You could sort of, if you were paying attention, you could sort of tell it was going that direction, and it just strikes me as ridiculous. These two people survive this ordeal, then something happens to one, and the other guy's like, "Oh, sure, whatever, I'll help you clean this up." It's like, oh god, like I thought it was such a horrible ending. Like the ending, like it might have been not a not a good movie, but it might have gotten like a high rating if the ending wasn't just so entirely shit. It's such a terrible ending. I just hated it.
Yeah.
Like that's the type of stuff that I just wished movies wouldn't do, because they know that people hate it. Just don't do it. Like the movie, I'm not saying the movie would have been good without it, but endings like that seem to me just to be in the movie to, I guess, give it like one final, big move, and when it's done so pathetically and in a way that you can see it coming from like a mile, it just leaves no impact aside from hate. So I don't know. This movie's, I think, okay. I'm just going to give this a 6 out of 10. I had a fine time with watching it the first time many years ago. I had an okay time. I like some of the characters. I like some of the scenes. It's just not a great movie. It's definitely below average, but I didn't hate it. So I think a 6 out of 10 seems pretty okay.
Yeah, I was tossing up between a 4 and a 5, and like I'll be generous and give it a 5, if only for the fact that it has Dave Franco and whatever the blonde girl's name is, and you know, at least it's got a little bit of actor power behind it, I guess.
So out of interest, I don't know who Dave Franco is. Is he related to James Franco?
Yeah, he's James Franco's little brother.
Huh. Interesting.
Yeah.
Beautiful. I did not know that.
I guess, one question. In the opening to this movie, there's a scene, where the two people take the shortcut and the one guy gets a little frisky and tries to have sex with the lady that he's with, and she basically turns him down, and after some rapish type action, he doesn't get what he wants, and he goes away, and then this little kid comes by. Would it bump up your rating a little bit if instead of that little kid attacking her, he was instead like, now it's my turn to get some?
I think I probably would have just found it even more ridiculous. Like, especially that kid who probably has absolutely zero interest in activities such as that.
Maybe he's one of those kids who gets his pubes early.
Well, I think I don't know if he was a sociopath or what, but I'm not sure if that would be his main goal in life.
Well, it will be at some point.
You would hope so.
Anyways, let's move on to something a little bit better than, to be honest, any of the movies we've discussed so far. At least in my opinion. So up next we've got American Ninja from 1985, which is about an American army guy named Joe Armstrong. That's such an American name, if I ever did see one. But he happens to be an orphaned martial artist who doesn't really have any memory of his childhood, which is where he gained all of his ninja skills while growing up. And basically some ninjas arrive on the scene and shit goes down from there. And, I won't spoil too much of the rest. Not that it's one of those movies where you can really spoil it, but whatever. This is one of those movies I've just pretty much watched my whole life. Saw it when I was young, saw it many times throughout my life. Very nostalgic for me. I think it's a fun movie. I mean, it's a dumb canon action movie. Like, Canon brought out a lot of these, like, ninja movies and action movies, and this one's directed by Sam Firstenberg, who directed the sequel to Enter the Ninja, which is called Revenge of the Ninja, which is a pretty entertaining ninja movie as well. And he's kind of brought more of that same entertainment factor to this series, because he directs the first two movies in this series. And the first two movies in this series are, in my opinion, pretty good. In fact, I'd say the second one might even be slightly better, even though I'd probably rate them the same. But yeah, I really enjoy these movies, at least the first two, and before I go into more about that, what do you think, or like, what's your experience with the American Ninja movies?
Yeah, so, as many people may know, action is not anything is not always really my forte, but I enjoyed Bloodsport when I watched it for the show. I enjoyed the other movie that was at Bloodsport, Kickboxer. Even though to be honest, I confused the two. I don't know which is which anymore, but that's fine. I enjoyed both of them. And you know what? I didn't go into this one with high expectations, but I actually had a pretty good time. I thought it was, it's just a damn action movie. I just had a good time seeing this guy just face off against these ninjas, and they're like, oh my god, it's an American ninja. Like, it was just over the top hilarious. I liked the fighting. I don't know if I was disappointed by almost any of the fighting. Like that scene where he goes to I forget if it's like Dark 13 or something, just this empty warehouse type thing, and he's like fighting off all these ninjas in like so many different ways. I mean, that's a fantastic scene. It's a really fun sequence. And I think that pretty much describes this movie. I think it's a really fun movie. And it surprised me by the amount of enjoyment I did get from it. So I was not disappointed.
Mm. And it's pretty much more of the same in the second movie, to be honest. Maybe even slightly sillier, like the plot at least. But, I mean, not only is the Michael Dudikoff character kind of interesting and entertaining, you know, with the fight scenes and everything, there's also Steve James in the movie, who has a slightly bigger role, I think, in the next movie. And he's also one of those guys that I really enjoy seeing in movies. He's got a decent role in this one, but he becomes more of a sidekick, I guess, in the second movie. In fact, he's one of those actors. Even yesterday, I think it popped up on some movie page that I'm in on Facebook. You know, someone mentioned it. I think it was his birthday or something. I mean, if you're not aware, he actually died, I think it was in the early 90s, when he was still, I think in his 30s. I think it was like a cancer or, you know, one of those types of diseases. And I always hear people talk about him like he was such a great guy, nice guy, you know. Yeah, and you hear that a lot from, you know, whenever people meet certain people at conventions and wherever they meet them, they always say, oh, you know, he's a nice guy. I mean, you kind of expect people in general to be nice, but for some reason, when people say it about this guy, I actually genuinely believe it. I don't know, maybe you have to see more of his movies or see more of his behind-the-scenes type stuff, but I don't know, it's just something that seems to resonate from him, at least in my opinion. I don't know, I just thought I'd mention that.
I always like so I'm not a big video game guy, but there's a video game that some of you guys might have heard of. It's called Skyrim, and in the game you can like fight these random people, and the people are like, hey, you fight well, let me be your friend. And the exact type of thing happens in this movie. He fights Steve James' character, and he's like, hey, you're a pretty good fighter, you're my friend now, you're pretty okay. So I just thought that was sort of funny. I mean, and I don't mean that as like a dig at the movie. I actually legitimately thought, hey, I haven't seen that before, that's fun. So, I don't know, I think it just comes down to, even though it's sometimes a bit goofy, like this is like some slow motion ninja action, but I'm not going to complain about that because, plus another great thing, there's like all these different type of ninja weapons. That it's, you know, those are like the generic ninja weapons you expect a ninja to have, but it's just fun. If this, I guess one, I would even say issue, because I'm still going to give this movie a pretty good rating. But if there's one thing I didn't care as much about, it's the random Asian guy who's like, hey, it's now time for me to tell you the secret. It just it's awfully convenient that guy happened to be stationed at a base right on the same island as that guy who tutored him back when he was a child before he lost his memories. But it's in its own way, it's sort of goofy. But I guess it's my one, I guess you could say, quote unquote problem.
Yeah, I mean, we've mentioned it's a pretty dumb action movie, so it's you know, you can forgive things like that, such big coincidences that yeah, that's not gonna happen in real life.
Until it does.
Yeah.
Oh, and another great scene was one point in time in this movie, the main character is sort of thrown into the stockades for, well, he basically being framed up, and this ninja comes to kill him while he's in jail. So this is a pretty good scene. I mean, because it's a jail, it's pretty close quarters, where he has to fight off the ninja and there's some armed guards outside. And I don't know, it's just another fun little sequence going on. Takes place at night too, which adds a little, I guess, extra oomph to it.
Yeah. There is a quote that I bring up a lot in everyday life from this movie. And it's towards the beginning, after the ninja attack, I guess, at the beginning of the movie, and the main bad guy, Ninja, he kind of asks about him, like, who is that guy? And the line that I always like to bring up whenever I can in any conversation is, he possessed great skills. It's such a corny line.
Makes it all the more fun though.
Mm.
Like I just love this stereotypical evil businessman, and it just and he's like honest about it too. You know, I'm not in this for any type of goal. I just want the money. Hey, at least he's open and upfront about it.
Yeah. So as I said, it's a fun action movie that doesn't take itself very seriously, or at least you shouldn't take it very seriously. And you know, I get a lot of nostalgic vibes from it too, because I used to watch this all the time growing up. So I give this one an 8 out of 10, and hopefully at some point in the near future we can talk about the sequel, which I think is equally as good.
Yeah, so this is, like I said at the beginning, it's a movie that I wasn't really expecting much from, but I had a really fun time with. I thought it was pretty enjoyable. I was into all the action scenes, and you know, obviously the story is not the best, but I like the friendship between the black guy and the main character. I wish the main character spoke a little more, but I sort of like the silent vibe he had going. So I'm actually also going to give this one an 8 out of 10. I had a good time, and I would not mind, I guess, continuing on watching based on this first movie.
Well, I'll be putting it on my lists, and if you pick it, we will watch it.
That is indeed how it works.
Yeah.
And much like how I picked a movie on my list and you picked it, next up we have the classic, or is it a classic, the 1979 When a Stranger Calls, in which case a psychopathic killer terrorizes a babysitter, then returns 7 years later to manage her again. Which, on the side note, if anybody is wondering, I read it directly from IMDb. So, yeah, the first, and this is actually my thoughts on this movie don't differ dramatically from many other people. And I saw this movie like, I don't know, like between 3 and 18 years before, so I've seen it before, but the first like 20 minutes I think are really good. I have a really good time with it. I think it's a great atmosphere. Then the movie sort of switches to almost a more procedural investigation crime type thing going on, which has a few interesting, you know, it's not bad, it just has a pretty different feel to it. And it picks up a little bit toward the end, but honestly once you get past the beginning it never really captures the same vibe it used to have. So it's one of those movies that has a really fantastic portion, and then the rest is maybe more middle of the road. But I guess I'm sort of curious. I think I know what you think about this movie, but what do you think about this movie?
Yeah, this is one that I've been wanting to watch for quite some time. In fact, I think it was on the that thread that we've got on the forum. You know, the one where we try and watch a bunch of movies throughout the year, which obviously I always delayed watching this one. But yeah, I finally watched it. I've got mixed feelings about it, kind of for the same reason that, you know, there's that switch after the first 20 minutes or so, which I wasn't expecting, because I had always, like, I never read too much about this movie, and of course, you know, people are aware of the whole "have you checked the children" type line in the movie, and so I was always under the impression that that was basically the movie, like someone just maybe inside the house calling a babysitter for, you know, 90 minutes, and, you know, things that happen throughout in the house. So I certainly wasn't expecting the switch where it goes into more of an investigation, and then, you know, you've got this unstable, wimpy guy running around, and So I mean, I didn't have a bad time with the movie. I just think it was a little bit up and down for me. Like, it had its good moments and then it had its kind of stale moments. And, like, some of the chase scenes didn't really do it for me. Like, a fat detective kind of chasing after a wimpy guy. Just, yeah, those parts, yeah. Like, I didn't mind some of the scenes where the killer's talking to the woman in the bar. You know, there's some things going on there, and also in her apartment. But yeah, some of the aspects of chasing after the guy just didn't do it for me. There are a couple of things in the movie, though, that I do want to point out. One of them early on was with the music. Like, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the THX intro sound.
Yeah, I was wondering because that with that one sound that pops up, it's like I'm pretty sure I know that.
Yeah. And it happened a few times throughout the movie, and it's just one of those things that, and I don't think it's exactly the same, but it's like 90-something% similar to it. So it that just kind of always made me giggle, I guess, whenever it happened, which I don't think was their intention. Now, obviously, this movie, like, I don't know if Black Christmas is the movie that started the whole prank call killer type movie, but it's obviously the first one that I can think of. So this movie definitely, whether you want to say it borrows from it, or it's a homage to it, or or you know, just plain stole, or is like a cheap cash-in of that aspect of that movie. But I mean, because this movie, it starts off with that babysitter, and then it kind of ends with that same babysitter character a little later on as she's older. And had they kind of removed the middle of this movie, and it was just him going away after all those years and coming back, and then without all that stuff in the middle about escaping from a mental hospital and detective chasing him, that type of thing, I think that would have been better. That's just me.
Yeah, I suspect a lot of people agree. I'm not sure how they could have sustained the movie with just the focus on the woman who was the babysitter, but I'm sure they could have found a way. I sort of like the idea of like, hey, this thing happens, and then we go forward 7 years, and then everybody looks pretty much the same age. But I like the idea of this private detective sort of trying to chase down this escaped patient. Though I think he found him way too easy. Like in 15 minutes, boom, like finds him on the street. Like it's not even difficult. But the final execution isn't always the most exciting stuff. So there is like a really amusing conversation in which this guy, the main private detective guy, who used to be a cop, is talking to one of his cop buddies. It's like, hey, I'm going to kill this guy, and the cop's like, well, okay, just make sure you do it safely. That's the cops for you. Like that scene, it's not supposed to be funny because it's a 70s movie, and there's like no funny 70s movies, but that just cracked me up when that scene came on. Because that's not really the direction I expected it to go. It's like, hey, just be safe and you can do it.
Yeah, well, spoiler alert, I guess. He did go out and do it.
Although he did not use the little needle thing I was hoping he was. He used a gun, which is a lot less exciting.
I will say one thing that I was kind of disappointed by was after, and this is still spoilers, but after he does shoot the guy at the end a few times, there's a moment where he puts a gun to his head. Like, I assume the guy's either dead or, you know, he's pretty much dead, about to die, and it would have been nice for him to just blow his fucking head off. I mean, that would have been really cool.
I was probably, I mean, like you said, he's already probably not alive at that point, so it may not have done much.
Well, I think it's one of those things where, you know, this guy is like, he's saying, okay, you know, I'm going to kill this guy. And, you know, he's already attacked this woman a couple of times, another woman. You think And, you know, he murdered really young kids. I mean, it was off screen, but that's what they say he did in that opening scene. So I would have felt like maybe he was at the point where he's like, I just gotta make sure this guy's fucking dead, and like just blow his fucking head off. And like, I know there's like a TV sequel to this movie, and people say it's actually a pretty decent sequel. I don't know if it's the same killer coming back or not, but if it is, I mean, I haven't seen the sequel yet, but if it is the same guy coming back, you know this part of the conversation is going to come back too, where he should have blown his fucking head off.
So I actually have seen the sequel a while back. From my recollection, the main people who come back from this movie would be the babysitter woman, and actually the overweight detective guy is actually still alive in '93 when the sequel came out, so he also pops back. And I think, from my understanding, this same situation happens to a younger girl with a different individual, different antagonist, so they try to work together to save him. I don't know, it's a movie that might be worth checking out at some point. I will say for this one thing I did want to mention before I forget. For the most part, past the first 20 minutes, there's not that many really interesting things. But there was, I think, one legitimately good scene toward the end when the woman's like frightened, the main babysitter woman, you know, she's a mother now. She's frightened, she's lying in bed, and she hears this whispering, and she thinks it's coming from the closet, but it's not coming from the closet. I mean, that was probably actually one of the creepiest scenes I thought in the movie.
Well, I agree, but there's one aspect of that just, like, I usually, these types of things don't usually bug me, and I'm not gonna say it like really bugged me, but I just can't help but think, I mean, spoiler alert, we know where the killer actually is, and I just can't see myself believing that someone could think it's coming from a closet across the room when it's actually coming from right next to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, the guy was locked up for, I think it was 6.5 years or so, so maybe during that time he just practiced throwing his voice.
Yeah, unless he had like a little tape recorder playing in the closet or something, which I highly doubt.
So, actually, on a somewhat related note, before I go into the rating, I mentioned in my when we reviewed Slaughterhouse, I mentioned I enjoyed the music of Mortician, as repetitive as it might be, and Mortician also have a song, sampling like maybe a minute of this movie, the part near the beginning, where it's like, hey, the cow is coming from inside the house, and that dramatic music is playing.
The THX music.
Yeah. So that is I mean, obviously everybody loves the opening, and that conversation right there, you know, just like the maybe 2-minute thing, where first she's talking to the guy, hey, what to be covered in your blood, and then hey, it's coming from inside the house. So that's fantastically thrilling scene, and it's funny because I was watching that and I was expecting after that to start hearing Mortician, because I just hear it so often. But so that's all I had. Somewhat amusing, somewhat irrelevant, but yes. So I'll just go into rating this. When a Stranger Cows is certainly a product of its time. Like Chucky said, it feels somewhat similar to Black Christmas. The whole phone thing going on, which I know has happened earlier, but it has a very 70s vibe, very sometimes slow moving. It's occasionally interesting. It's one of those movies that's probably, you know, I don't have a problem with people calling it a classic, but it's never been a movie. Of course, I've only seen it twice, but it's never been a movie I've particularly been overjoyed to see. But it's a decent movie. It's just really, it's not a movie I would consider great, and though I'd certainly recommend horror fans watch it maybe once, I think you can be excused if you do have to see it a second time. So I'm going to give this movie a 6.5. And I'm going to round up to a 7, so around, I think it's just a bit below average, but like I said, the opening minutes spectacular, so at least watch that part.
Yeah, I'm going with a pretty similar rating. I'm going to give it a 6 out of 10. And I feel like maybe there's a slight chance it can get to a 7 with a rewatch, but yeah, that middle chunk of the movie just... I mean, it wasn't bad, but it's just such a different shift to what happens in, the first 20 minutes and the last 15, 20 minutes. So I just felt like if they could just stay focused on those same characters rather than shifting to, trying to become friends with this other woman, and yeah, it just seemed like it was unnecessary to have, and probably just put in because, hey, we need a way to make this movie 90 minutes long. So yeah, 6 out of 10. I didn't have a bad time with it. It was up and down. Maybe if it'd blown the guy's head off at the end, that might have
Moved it up one.
help lift it up a bit, depending on what they show. I mean, they didn't show him kill any of the kids, or you don't necessarily have to show him kill the kids, but there's something about just saying it off screen that doesn't have quite as much of an impact, I guess. I mean, we don't even see the kids at all in that scene, so maybe if I had at least seen them at some point, not see them get killed, but, see them kind of have some sort of interaction with the killer. I don't know, something.
So I was actually thinking while I was watching this, because I am a child of the 90s, the whole babysitter thing that I see in some 70s movies, 80s movies, and I guess it happens nowadays too, but I just, like, hey, this is teenage, hey, you can just watch our children for like 6 hours. I don't know, I get it, you have to do what you have to do, but it seems like these, I think the guy was a doctor, it seems like they didn't even know this girl. They just maybe talked to him on the phone once before. It's like, yeah, hey, you can watch our children, they're sleeping, so, we'll be back around midnight. I don't know, that situation just seems, at least from my, I guess, more modern day perspective, it just seems so, like, sketchy.
But let's not forget the perks. I mean, you get low-fat yogurt.
Yeah, I like how that's it. Hey, if nothing else works, you got low-fat yogurt. Yeah, I guess he's a doctor, so it makes sense, but...
I like how he had to emphasize it's low-fat, like, you need to lose some pounds, girly. Yeah.
Yes. He's like the guy in, Trick or Treats? That guy knew how to treat babysitters.